do both, but I'm happy you're taking. Yeah, glad to see you here.
Thank you. And this is our last meeting with the
Josh just
Okay,
came in.
Josh Walters is here. Okay,
We need Michael, because Michael's gotta be the, he was taking this from home, so,
I'm gonna start inland wetlands.
okay, let's.
How did
Recording in progress.
how did I just disappear? Can you still hear me?
We can still hear you, but did you shut your camera off?
No, not on purpose. There I am. Okay. Okay, I call to order the meeting of the Inland Wetlands Agency, special meeting of November 3rd at 6 p.m. Members present are Aho, Chandy, Ron, and Wooch, and Walters. 3, 4, 5, Walters. Yeah. We have a consent agenda, which consists of minutes from October 20th. Someone like to put that forward? Ken, turn on your microphone.
All right, move to approve the consent agenda.
Okay, moved by Ron,
Second by Walter.
second by Walters.
I'd like to note that I didn't listen to the recording, so I'd like to abstain from the vote.
Okay. Do we still have can 4 of us vote for it?
That's a good question.
We need a quorum of members who were present at that meeting in order to approve. So if we don't, we will need to table those minutes and wait to act on them until the 17th of November. And
Okay.
that's fine.
Okay,
that's
let's
fine.
do that. Okay, we'll table that one. And we'll open, we have 2 public hearings. One we're going to continue. So at 6:02 p.m., I open the public meeting related to the improvements on Maple Road. And members present are Aho, Chandy, Ron, Wooch, and Walters, who's seated for absent members. We have a motion to continue that public hearing to November 17th. Yeah, November 17th. Someone
Yes,
like
Mr. Chair, we
Go
are
ahead.
waiting on the wetland scientist. Additionally, we are at day 28 of the 35-day period in which a hearing can be kept open. So staff will make sure that the applicant, the Public Works Department, consents to an extension for that time period over the course of the next couple days.
Okay, very good.
Paul, I'm interrupting. Michael, will we have that report for the 17th?
Come hell or high water, Mr. Ron.
Understood, sir.
Affirmative.
I love the assertiveness.
Okay, we've got would someone like to move to continue it, please?
I can put it forward.
Okay,
I move to continue application W1639 to the November 17, 2025 regular meeting of the Inland Wetlands Agency at 6 p.m. 4 South Eagleville Road, Mansfield, Connecticut 06268.
okay, moved by Chandy,
Which was second?
second by Wooch. All in favor?
I'm raising my
Oh,
hand, Walters.
Okay, very good. Okay, passes unanimously. Our second public hearing is,
Has to begin at 6:05, so we just need to talk slow. It's
Still
6:04
1
right
minute.
now, so just need to give it 1 minute.
okay,
Okay.
We could do communications, we skipped that item. Is there anything?
oh yeah, we have communications from the Conservation Commission from their regular meeting minutes. And it's still 6:04 according to my computer.
It's the longest 6:04 that I think we've ever experienced. But it is
6:05,
now,
my computer
it is now
says
6:05.
It's 6:05.
Okay, so I open the public hearing related to the replacement of a culvert on Wildwood Road. at 6:05 p.m. Members present are Aho, Chandy, Ron, Wutch, and alternate Walters, who's seated for absent members. Yes, Michael, explain what's happening here. A culvert replacement that needs to be done.
Yes, culvert replacement, Mr. Chair. So as we recall at the previous meeting, Assistant Town Engineer Derek Delay gave a presentation detailing the state of this culvert, which is experiencing a decent amount of collapse at this point. The head wall on the upstream side is failing, and about 6 feet from the edge of the road towards that is starting to become what are, in Mr. Delay's words, a giant hole. Fixing that, of course, is a high priority. Unfortunately, unlike the culvert repair on Separatist Road, which this body approved about a month prior, the state of collapse of these culverts necessitates their removal and a new set of culverts installed. Public Works is taking the opportunity to upgrade these culverts. They're currently 24 inches in diameter. The proposal is to put in 36-inch diameter culverts that will meet the standards of the DEP's, or rather the DOT's standard for the 50-year storm conveyance for roads of this size. The project was presented to the Conservation Commission, who had only minimal comments, noting that this is the kind of repair that has to be done. Because this is a 2-culvert system, this is relatively easy to fix because you can divert water through one culvert, repair the other one, then divert it back. You don't have to pump around the culvert, and that reduces the amount of earthwork that you have to do because you don't have to dig a small hole in order for dewatering. So there's even less impact on the wetland. There was a question that remained about whether or not it would be possible at all to save the fine masonry wall that is on the south side. Mr. Delay says that the plan is to reuse the stone in a rock bank, but because the pipes cut through in an exact size behind the wall, it's not like you can just saw cut the wall, put in the larger pipes. They're going to have to go to more of a riprap embankment that's going to incorporate some of those elements, and they may use those stones in wing walls for that. Notices were sent out. This was originally postponed because notices did not go out in time to meet statutory noticing requirements. But our department has not received any indication that there was concern ahead of time from any neighbors near this area.
Okay. Any questions for Michael? Any comments from Jennifer?
Did you want to include, I think we want to include the Conservation Commission minutes of October 15th into the
Yeah.
record.
Yes. Okay, is there any reason to keep this public hearing open? If not, I'd entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved. Move to
Okay.
close the public hearing.
Moved by Ron,
Second.
second by Chandy. All in favor? Okay,
Voting
unanimous?
in favor again.
Josh? Okay, so affirmative. Okay, passes unanimously.
Noting that DeVivo did join at 6:07 and was here to vote in favor, Mr. Chair.
Oh, yes, okay, yes.
Just for
Welcome,
the record, noting that.
welcome, John. Okay, now we go to okay, so that's closed. Now we go to old business. And the old business is this culvert on Wildwood Lane. And we have a motion to approve the application.
Yes, that memo is in the staff memo. There's a recommended motion there.
I can put it forward.
Okay, thank you.
I, Chandy, move to grant an inland wetlands license pursuant to the Inland Wetlands and Watercourses regulations of the Town of Mansfield to the Town of Mansfield Department of Public Works for application W1640 culvert replacement on Wildwood Road, proximate to 125 Wildwood Road and 101 Woodland Road. In approving this application, the Inland Wetlands Agency considered all testimony and communications. This action is based on a finding of no anticipated significant impact on the wetlands or watercourses and is conditioned on the following provisions being met. A complete construction sequence, including water control and diversion specifications and erosion control detail, shall be submitted by the design engineer or principal contractor to the environmental planner prior to the beginning of construction. The applicant shall direct the design engineer or another qualified specialist to inspect the site during dewatering. This qualified specialist shall be responsible for ensuring that the construction sequence is adhered to and that all materials and methods used within the stream channel are appropriate for the sensitive environment in which work is taking place. 2. Appropriate erosion and sedimentation controls shall be installed prior to construction, maintained during construction, and removed when disturbed areas are permanently stabilized. The Mansfield Inland Wetlands agent shall inspect the site after the erosion and sedimentation controls are in place, but prior to site disturbance. 3. Following culvert installation, native plants should be planted in any areas disturbed by construction to restore the natural vegetative character of the wetland. A planting schedule consisting of native plants appropriate to the soil characteristics of the area should be prepared and submitted to the environmental planner prior to planting. This approval is valid for 5 years until November 3rd, 2030, 2030, unless additional time is requested by the applicant and granted by the Inland Wetlands Agency. The applicant shall notify the wetlands agent before any work begins, and all work shall be completed within 1 year. Any extension of the activity period shall come before this agency for further review and comment.
Moved by Chandy,
Which will second?
second by Wutch. Any discussion? All those in favor, raise your hand. Josh, that's a
Raising my hand.
affirmative? Yeah, okay.
Yep.
So passes unanimously. And that is all the business for inland wetlands for tonight. And inland wetlands special meeting is closed at 6:12 p.m. I'm going to leave you in the capable hands of Binu Chandy for the planning and zoning meeting. You're going to hear an excellent report by Michael, which I heard this morning. And so I'm going to say goodbye for now. See you on the 17th.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Paul. Are we ready to move to the next meeting? Yes. Jen?
Yeah, yes,
Okay.
yes.
So I call the November 3rd, 2025 virtual special meeting of the Mansfield Planning and Zoning Commission to order at 6:13 p.m. Members present are Chandy, DeVivo, Ron, Wutch, and alternate member Walters, who's seated today for multiple absent members. I believe the consent agenda includes the PZC meeting minutes from 10:20, but it'll have to be tabled for today, right? We don't have a sufficient quorum to vote on it. So moving to item number 3, new business. It is the plan of conservation development, future land use designations map discussion. And I believe Michael has a presentation ready for us that will help us with the discussion. Take it away, Mike. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm going to start sharing. I'm going to kind of introduce it. This is a, and I'm going to share my screen, but when I was sharing, can you all see this?
Yes.
Future land use in Mansfield.
Mhm.
So, as you know, we're in the throes of completing our plan of conservation and development.
Mhm.
And a key component of the plan of conservation development is our future land use section. And that's in the current plan, it's chapter 8. It's going to be the last chapter in the new plan because we felt like we wanted infrastructure to go beforehand. So, but we wanted, while we really just felt like we needed to bring you in on the sausage making process, I think. So, so basically this chapter, it's sort of the culmination of the plan. It builds on all of the prior chapters, the goals and recommendations for natural and cultural resources, community amenities and character, economic development, housing. And it really it describes the policy framework for the physical development of the town. And this is the map that you all use when you're looking at, I mean, you use the whole plan when you're looking at a special permit, but specifically when you're doing changes to the zoning regulations, you look at this map, this chapter in particular, to make sure that the zoning regulation changes are consistent with this plan of conservation and development. So we felt like we wanted to bring you along with, you know, where we're headed with this chapter. There are not a ton of changes that are going to be made, but the changes are something that they deserve thought and discussion. So currently in your future land use map, you've got some categories of groupings of your designations. You've got your rural conservation areas, and that's characterized by low density development. It's areas where you want to prioritize preservation of natural, agricultural, and historic resources. If you're going to do development, you want to support infill and redevelopment that is compatible with the rural landscape. And you want to encourage integration of residential, agricultural, and limited neighborhood scale commercial uses. So that right here, that rural conservation area, that's the majority of our town right now. So anything in beige is sort of our residential, agriculture, forestry area. The green is our open space, whether it's permanently preserved or just open space that we have. The yellow are these rural residential villages. And then we have some of these, the orange are like Mansfield Center. We've got Eagleville, Mansfield Depot, and then even this area in red, Perkins Corner, and then the area 32 and 195, and then the area around Flaherty Road. Those are also considered to be sort of our rural conservation areas. Then the second grouping are our smart growth development areas, and that's since 2006. The Planning and Zoning Commission has done this, and all of our plans reflect that. We really are focusing growth where housing, jobs, and shopping are close together. That's the area where we want to provide diverse housing and job opportunities for all income levels and life stages. We want to direct new development to areas near existing employment and commercial centers. So a lot of those areas are around Eastbrook Mall or Yukon. And then we want to direct development in locations where there's public transit access and existing or planned water and sewer. And the planned is, I mean, that was in 2015. We have water and sewer in those areas. So this is what you get. This is the 2015 future land use map. And as you can see, these kind of darker areas, we've got compact residential, transitional, mixed use center transitional. The purple area is Yukon, and that's in Northwest Mansfield, and then also in Southern Mansfield, with a few nodes of development, Perkins Corner, Eagleville, Mansfield Center, and a few other places. So I skipped a slide, sorry about that. Things that are working that we've been noticing, and we've been hearing from you, we've been hearing from the public. Obviously we've gotten a lot of medium and high density housing that is being developed in our smart growth areas, and that's expanded the town's overall housing stock. We have about 2,000 units that were approved since the last POCD, about 1,260, as you know, since 2020. Our conservation areas are effectively preserving open space and protecting the town's natural resources. While we've been developing in these smart growth areas, we also have done a lot of work in conservation. Things that could be better, and this is reflected in the surveys and the many conversations that we've had, that you've had as a commission, is that we need more variety in who lives and works here, more diverse housing, jobs, and people. And there aren't enough homes for young families, working professionals, or older residents who may want to stay in town. And many local jobs and our housing stock depend on one single employer, and that would be Yukon. So again, this is what we have for 2015. So in 2025, what we're thinking is that we still want to continue to direct development to our smart growth areas. We want to continue to protect Mansfield's natural resources, safeguarding the environment and preventing sprawl, keeping rural conservation areas in the majority of Mansfield. But so those are really consistent with 2015 and many plans before that. But and promote diverse housing and jobs for people across all incomes and life stages. That was in the 2015 plan, but I think we've heard in through all of our public engagement and through just the planning that everyone is doing across the state is that we need to promote this diverse housing and jobs for people across all incomes and life stages. So what we want to do is we want to clarify and communicate the purpose of each future land use designation. And Michael's going to kind of go over that. We want to add a neighborhood residential designation. And Michael, again, will talk about that. We want to talk to you a little bit about the rural. We have two classifications that maybe could be combined. So with the addition of the neighborhood residential, we also have rural residential village. Mansfield, we have these wonderful historic villages, but the neighborhood residential is almost as if we want to replicate that pattern. And so we're thinking that this neighborhood residential designation could be a way that we would replicate the pattern that we have in our historic, rural villages. We want to talk to you about these two designations that it's kind of strange that they're separate. One is village center and one is rural commercial, and maybe think about combining that. We thought we should probably be redefining light industry because a lot's changed since 2015. You can do a lot of light industry without having a lot of neighborhood impacts, but our previous definition includes things like warehousing. We thought maybe that we should rethink that. And then we thought we should be more prescriptive or sort of identify what this institutional zone is. We sort of took everything that was government owned before and we made it purple because it was, we did this future land use category based on who owned it as opposed to what our policy or our desire to see in the future. So with that, I'm gonna go through the slides, but Michael is gonna do the talking.
Thanks, Jennifer. So to start off with, to orient us on what our various future land use designations actually are saying, right? A future land use designation is kind of a broad aspirational statement about what kinds of forms of development we think make sense in an area, right? As opposed to zoning, where we're being very prescriptive on dimensions. This is more of these kinds of things would make sense here. And a lot of them plot, when you think about it on a planning scale, on this very classic planning graphic, which is called the rural to urban places graph, right? You go from the most natural zone that is completely undeveloped all the way up to an urban core center, right? And you have different places in your community as you're denoting what makes sense to go where that are going to have different degrees of intensity of development, different amounts of green space, proximity to each other, different types of intensive uses. And ideally what you want when you build these is for a community to have ways to transition into these relatively smoothly. I went through and I attempted, based on our kind of the average density that you get in these areas, to plot on here roughly where our existing land use designations fall. And we wind up with kind of two gaps. We have designations for areas that are supposed to be conserved and flood zones. We have areas for kind of a suburban zone with largish lots and something that's going to be happening kind of in a village cluster. And then we have stuff for density. But Jennifer, if you go to the next slide, everything else falls into this broad category that encompasses all rural residences, all agriculture, and all forestry, from sprawling 250 acres of pasture at the Stearns Farm, all the way down to 20,000 square foot lots along Circle Drive, all fall into this right now. And that is not particularly useful for planning. If the goal is to be able to figure out where we want things to be in the future generally, it's so broad that it becomes non-informative. So what we think makes sense is to try to break up rural, the RAR area as it exists now into two things. To move RAR to really be for large lots and farming, and then to find a new land use designation that will denote small to medium-sized lots, single to two-family homes, kind of clustered together. And our proposal for what we call this is neighborhood residential. Primarily
Just
freestanding houses. Yeah.
sorry, just this land use classification we came up with that for the Northwest Mansfield plan, so it's not new. The application of it throughout in other areas of town will be new for this plan. So sorry to interrupt you, Michael. I know
No,
you're on a
it's
roll.
a good point. When we were doing Northwest Mansfield, one of the things that we noticed immediately is that the patterns of development, the areas that we currently call RA residential 90, as opposed to the rural agricultural residential 90, which is most of town in our zoning map, those areas have a very distinct kind of pattern of development where they tend to be nested subdivisions linked together, smaller than 40,000 square foot lots. You create kind of a sense of space where you have a network of small community trails, cul-de-sacs, things like that. They're all individual lots near pedestrian infrastructure, but they are doing something distinct from building your 5 acres out in the country, right? They're not interspersed with open acres of forest or farm field in the same way. There may be some at the end of the lot, but you don't wind up with, a half mile between houses. So we think it makes sense to start putting these places. And we think that it makes sense to put them where that is the pattern of development that already exists. And I'm going to take you through some of the places in town that we think already kind of are this thing. So starting down at the south of Mansfield, we have the Michelle Lane and Adeline Place complex, which you can see here. We're going to go look first from the air, and then I'm going to take you onto the street with a Google Street View image. So, right, these are about half-acre lots. In their size and massing, we're looking at, these are often colonials. They have decent front yards. I grew up on a lot like this in Waterford, Connecticut, in a subdivision that was about 20,000 square feet. And these houses can be anywhere with a finished basement from, you could have 2,000 to 2,500 square feet in these houses. They're not necessarily small, but they're clustered in such a way that you have kids on the block playing in the neighborhood, and they're kind of their own thing, right? We look at our next area, we're going to look at something that's a little bit denser, but still goes in the exact way, Circle Drive. Right, so Circle Drive, also down at the south end of town, these lots are 0.3 to 0.5 acres. So these are even smaller, right? These are 20,000 square feet or less. And they are all kind of wound around this one interconnected block, which is across the street from a community park. These are smaller houses, right? There's a little bit less foliage here as you go along it, smaller front yards, small houses, but by being clustered close together, you're able to get a sense of place. It's its own connected thing. Coming up to the north end of town, Paul just left us, but he's over on Westwood? He's over on one of the woods, and Westwood is a perfect example of neighborhood residential. If you go out to neighborhood residential, this is a little bit more of a naturalistic woody feel when you're driving down the street than Adeline Place, but you're getting a diversity of different housing types, right? You've got in this picture, I see a ranch, a raised ranch, a cape, right? All tucked back a little bit, lots of mature trees around them, but the lots themselves are small. Individual lots. You would potentially have the ability on some of the larger lots here to, split them into a duplex without really changing how the community feels from the streetscape. And then if we go a little bit to the south, Heights. Birchwood Heights, Monticello Lane, Felon, there are a lot of roads in this part of town that are about 0.5 to 0.9 acres. And they are actually the most forested. If you're looking at one, it's a relatively large house with an attached garage that sprawls. From this house, you can't actually see your neighbors because you're totally treed in. But as you walk down the street, you've got multiple instances of people being able to gather and coordinate in these small tucked away things. So we think neighborhood residential already exists. We just haven't called it that yet. And we think that these are good places that people like to live. These kinds of lots, particularly once you start connecting these individual, small-ish lots to each other with trails and sidewalks, and community hubs, they become a very attractive place to raise children. They become a very attractive place to age in place, to put on an ADU for your kid or to move into one and rent out your house. They're the exact kind of lots that we want to encourage people to grow with and we want more of. Now we look at Northwest Mansfield. We spent a lot of time in the Northwest Mansfield plan figuring out where these go. And you can see they're in dark green on this map. We have some over by Hillendale, some up by Timber Drive. We've got, oh goodness, Jennifer, help me out.
Rolling Hills.
Rolling Hills. So Rolling Hills is a perfect example of neighborhood residential, even though it is a manufactured home park, right? Individual lots, individually owned by different people that are a community, right? So it is kind of the ideal of creating a place that is filled with homeowners, people who are invested in that place, people who are improving it as a sense of place. Now, while we're on this map, we can also talk about some of the other things that we've been thinking about with the future land use map, and that were kind of came out of the Northwest Mansfield plan as recommendations. Specifically, we wanted to refine our compact residential transitional areas. So compact residential includes, we're talking 3-story buildings. You could talk about a perfect 6, which is a term we use. You've got, if you've been to Hartford, a lot of those buildings have been converted. You've got 2 apartments per story, 3 stories tall, right? You could have a bunch of nested townhouses, quadplexes. Those are appropriate in the compact residential area. And that's the densest that we like to go before you start getting into the mixed-use center areas where we're getting stuff like the standard, right? The really dense multi-story stuff. Compact residential transitional is a intermediate between that and neighborhood residential. What you're looking for there is you're looking for stuff that is akin to Freedom Green down in the south end of town. You got a lot of duplexes with each other. Sometimes you'll have 5 units in a row, right, in a larger building. But these are, again, that's kind of more of the density that we want to have. And we really want to see that kind of density put into place in between the really big dense stuff like the Standard or Yukon and residential houses in a rural agricultural area. So as you look at that map, you'll see that the dark brown has shrunk down a lot. We've either kind of redefined it as neighborhood residential or we've redefined it as compact residential. We've left some of these compact residential areas in place because we do think they are important for density. We do still think that targeted density is very important. But for a lot of these transitional areas, we want to see if we can get something a little bit intermediate. So I guess to start there, does anybody have any questions about neighborhood residential and compact transition as a concept? It's like I'm back to teaching.
Everything sounds good until now.
Okay.
Yes.
So in that case, we're going to move on to talk about something on the economics side, a little bit on the commercial side. That was a bit on housing for getting housing that supports a diversity of people at different stages in their life. Now we want to talk about businesses that support a diversity of people at different stages of their life. We have talked about our smart growth areas, which are concentrated along the Wyndham border or around Yukon. They have lots of employment already, access to transportation, they have public water and sewer, but they are not the only places where we have hubs of businesses in our town. There are two areas, two land use designations in our rural conservation sector that do focus on commerce in some way, economic activity, and that is the village center and rural commercial. Now, village center, you can find this in Mansfield Depot and also in Mansfield Center, and at the base of Eagleville. Whereas the rural commercial areas, that's up at the north end of town, the intersection of 195 and 32, yes, as well as down in Perkins Corner is our largest one, down by the bowling alley and the drive-in theater. And there's a small one just south of Town Hall at the corner of Flaherty Road. Now, I know what you may be thinking, since I've phrased it as village center versus rural commercial, what's the difference? That's a great question, imagined commenter. So if we go to the next slide, start to think about what's going on with these. A village center tends to be embedded within those rural residential villages, which are historic in nature. The rural residential villages are all noted where they are because there was some sort of a historic development there. And historically, before zoning, people would have their businesses where their houses were, right? So we find village centers as kind of the existing commercial areas of these old settlements. They are something that we do not allow light industry there, though in some of them we have had light industry uses in the past. Hold on to that. The thing that we want to encourage now in them is infill. Offices, commercial uses, restaurants, small businesses that plug into an existing landscape and don't alter it terribly much because we like what's already there. We like the feel of those old charming buildings getting refurbished and repaired. If something new goes in, we want it to feel architecturally similar. Conversely, rural commercial is not quite as historic. It is auto-oriented commercial development. That was the way it was codified in the last POCD. You have a lot of entertainment uses there. You have offices. You have construction. It does allow light industry. Or at least that's the theory behind this. Anyway, one of them, closer to highways, easier to get into, have a bit more heavy uses than your village centers. But the thing is, none of these are hooked into infrastructure. They wind up somewhat limited in the density that they can go up to, and a lot of the uses they're doing are the same. There are plenty of offices down in Mansfield Center. There are restaurants over in Perkins Corner. We don't, and we will focus primarily on Perkins Corner here just because it's the largest of the rural commercial areas. But these are both mixed use areas for commerce. We allow housing in both of them. We allow economic activity in both of them. Perkins Corner is younger, but parts of it are still a historic village. Hypothetically, one's more car-centric, and you can feel this when you drive through. It feels a bit more like a 1950s development than some of the villages, which are a bit more historic. But since the rural commercial is already sometimes in a village, and the village centers also have plenty of car-orientedness, because I mean, we are in Connecticut and we're not in a city. You still have to drive most places. The big difference is that rural commercial areas can do light industry while village centers can't. So that leads to the question of, okay, well, if that's a meaningful difference, what is light industry? And light industry is a lot of things. light industry exists on a spectrum, right? Very light industry that does not have a large amount of impacts in our neighborhood. Heavy industry, which is doing huge production, large scale, automotive, steel, raw materials, large finished products. Light industry can be a lot of things. Includes food packaging, paper making, 3D printing, which has come a long way and enabled us to do a very large amount of stuff. Medical supply manufacturing. All of that is in light industry. You often don't need a ton of floor space to run light infantry. I've seen it run in the first story of apartment building, 3 stories of apartments above it. Because it tends to move a limited amount of merchandise, you'll need some trucks coming in, but not necessarily 18-wheelers. So you don't necessarily wind up with a large amount of disruption to your neighbors, and you can locate it in smaller buildings so you can reuse spaces. Or if you need to build something, it's not so massive that it can't fit into an existing landscape. And because of this, light industry offers us a great way to allow flexibility in economy, find new places for job creators to come in, get jobs for people, stimulate economy, build economic resilience, have lots of different businesses going on in case of economic downturn. Now, our current definition of light industry includes warehousing. And that was written back in 2014, which doesn't seem that long ago to me, but just proves how quickly time is passing. But one thing I do remember from 2014 is that the culture of Amazon packages was a lot different in terms of the size of warehouses we were seeing and the shipping that we were actually getting. Large-scale logistics, like the huge Amazon hubs that exist now, is obviously a different scope than every other use that we listed under light industry in 2015. I don't think that's what we mean. I think that falls into a slightly different category. And so I think what we need to do is we need to change that, strip that out. But yeah, no, you can go to the next slide, Jen, because that's actually great. So like, where has light industry been already? I mentioned that light industry had already been in the village center. Well, here's a couple buildings that you have probably driven by as you drive around town, and you may not have known had light industry uses in them. 216 Stafford Road. 483 stores, the Grange, which we've recently had some applications for uses there, right? Both of these were able to make use of existing buildings, which just look like some commercial buildings. In some cases, they're historic, and we're able to give them a new life doing something that was not offensive to the community. And not every site is perfect for them, right? The Grange, fortunately, has a large amount of parking, which allows you to stage. You're near major roads on Stafford Road, but a lot of our village center and rural commercial areas are near major roads. The big thing with light industry in these areas is not the existence of light industry itself, but it's really scale and your form. Can you integrate into the existing landscape? And if you can, right? If you can, what's to stop it? My fundamental argument here is that I don't think if we change light industry to exclude warehousing, that they're actually different at all. We're drawing an arbitrary line in the sand and saying that 1950s style automotive development isn't historic. And so why don't we combine them, right? Why don't we combine them and make them one area?
And I think this is, what we're talking about right here. These are high level policy decisions. Open New has her hand up, but it's not the zoning. The zoning is going to deal with the details of a lot of this.
Right, we've got 5 different business zones in town, which the staff have been talking about. We do want to consolidate those a little bit, but it's likely that when it comes to the zoning, there will still be plenty of opportunity to figure out what makes sense, specifically in what places, based on site-specific characteristics and area characteristics. But if we're painting with a broad brush, which is important to do on a policy level, I think that they're not that different. Banu, what did you want to say?
Yeah, so what is the light industry in both these places, 216 Stafford and 483 stores?
So for in the Grange, it's no longer there, but you approved Glisten Diamonds, which was sort of a gem manufacturing. And that was, so this is, the Grange is actually RAR 90. And so this is a non-conforming use. And it was, so they got a special permit to intensify the non-conformity or to
Okay.
yeah. So, and then this white building is hard to see, but that's, if any of you went to the eye doctor, Dr. Tischler, that's his building. And they've had, sort of vaccine manufacturing there, so on a smaller scale, and I think that was it for that.
Okay, just curious. Thank you.
So if light industry works in both places, as I think it does, then I don't think there's anything distinguishing these land use designations. And if there's nothing distinguishing them, we should merge them. I had a conversation today with our consultant FHI, and they pointed out a really important thing, which is that the way that we're thinking about our village centers makes them places in a way that thinking about a rural commercial designation doesn't, right? It's a place, it's a distinct place worth preserving, worth protecting. It has something going on. And that's why we want to keep it the way it is. I think that's true of Perkins Corner. I think there's interesting stuff over there that people value in this community with the businesses that are there, with the way that it is set up. It's an interesting area. It has a school just to the north of it. And so there's something there that is worth a sense of place as well. Does anybody have any questions on this? This is as opposed to neighborhood residential, which I do consider follows straight on. I would like people to disagree with me if you disagree with me. This is your plan, after all. You are driving policy where your staff trying to make it make sense. Ken, do you have?
Yeah, I'm looking for a definition. It's a term we've been using for about as long as I've been on part of the Planning and Zoning Commission. We use this term rural commercial, rural agriculture. Where in our definitions have we defined what rural is?
So those are in, if you look at what these, you go to chapter 8 of the POCD, and it talks about, what you mean when you say a rural commercial. It's on page 8.24 of the POCD. The purpose of this designation is to provide limited locations for auto-oriented commercial development. And then you go on to the design characteristics. These areas are designed by auto-oriented commercial development. And in the case of Perkins Corner, a variety of recreation and entertainment uses, including a driving range, bowling alley, blah, blah, blah. Design. Then you identify where they're located, and then you do your design objectives, which are to provide appropriate transitions to adjacent residential areas and provide a walkable environment on public streets. And then you go into and you talk about the use types: office, commercial, light industry, agriculture, forestry, open space, recreation, schools, and municipal uses. And then the page before that is the village center. Then you have the rural residential village before that.
Rural, in terms of just what can we discern about what rural commercial means outside of like, what does rural in that mean, is a relatively low density of development. The spectrum, if we think about that spectrum that I showed at the beginning, right? Rural areas fall into slots 2 and 3, right? They are out in the country. They're places where you are expecting large swaths of undeveloped land in between your developments. And sometimes you'll get clusters of development that are separated from each other by that undeveloped land. But I don't know if we've got it in exactly what we mean in the appendices or glossary.
I would argue that if you drill down and you look at how we've described what village center is, it says the design characteristics, and just remove the historic component about it, but design characteristics. These areas are characterized by a mix of historic and newer buildings that are relatively small scale. I would say that's both true in Mansfield Center and in Perkins Corner and in Eagleville and Mansfield Depot, at different scales, both in footprint and in height. Following the village pattern, buildings are typically located fairly close to the road and are clustered together on lots with narrow frontages as compared to the more rural areas of town. And then you look at what the objectives are, it says ensure that infill development respects the scale and pattern of the historic context. You could just say context there. For
Mhm.
example, additional housing could be provided in multi-unit large houses that look like single-family homes, clusters of cottages and similar approaches. Encourage infill commercial development to take design cues from historic structures to complement the residential and rural landscape. Provide clear guidance in design standards for new structures as well as changes to the existing development. Provide a walkable environment on public streets. It just feels like we have two kind of really small areas of rural commercial, and it feels that even though I would definitely argue that Mansfield Depot and Mansfield Center have more maybe historic structures, and Mansfield Center certainly is a historic district. What we want, if we see more development in Perkins Corner, or even I would argue at the corner of 195 and 32, is a village center type development. And I think, yeah, and if to the extent possible, walkable and close to public transportation. But arguably Perkins Corner and 32 and 195 are less walkable, but I don't think that's a distinction we want to highlight, because if we could get it walkable, I think people would want that.
Mhm. Acknowledged. I am now, and I will continue to quibble with our use of the word rural
Yeah,
in describing almost anything in Mansfield.
well,
Having
yeah.
had my say about this, I'll retreat.
No,
There's a lot of trees in Mansfield. And you're absolutely right to pick up on, like, there's a lot of acres of farmland and there's a lot
It
of trees
just,
in
yeah,
Mansfield. Unless you're in the middle of Yukon campus, standing on the seal beneath the library, everything does have, to some degree, a rural feel.
point of view, Connecticut is one massive suburb. But I've just,
Kinda, yeah. Um, you know, I think
but I don't want to get sidetracked here, okay, with that. It's not all that important.
if you want to come down to the office tomorrow, we can commiserate.
So are we planning to use the term village center instead of rural commercial?
I think so, either village center or village commercial,
It
right?
would keep
Because
me
if we
happy.
it would create nice parallels. So like you have rural residential, right? And then you have rural commercial, and then you have neighborhood residential, right? Because it's a little bit denser. You have rural village. So again, we kind of like we're creating parallels in like type of place where you are and then what's going on there in these kind of two-word names. But I think we're still workshopping that and we're open to suggestions.
Yeah, and I think we have too many categories, so reducing them will help us understand what we have in our town and
I do want to agree with
priorities.
Benu about that.
Yeah,
It would be, I think, very helpful to all of us.
yes. We keep forgetting what's the difference, right? So,
Yeah.
We must have 88, whatever that number is, different
Yeah.
categories for this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And-
I guess I'm hearing thumbs up for the rural village center rural commercial merger.
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay. I personally like village center myself as a designation, but
I'm with it.
All right. Last one of these. And this one is in some ways a little open-ended, because this is more of an observation. So when we were working on neighborhood residential, we talked about how the rural agricultural residential designation, which does, as Ken noted, encompass the overwhelming majority of town, wasn't very useful because it was too broad and it wasn't really saying anything about what we wanted for that land and how we think we can develop the community in a healthy way.
Okay.
We think that institutional is the same thing, but somehow worse. So the institutional future land use designation is a large number of potential uses, all of which are important, but it doesn't say anything about them, right? So obviously it's UConn, right? UConn's core campus, poster child for institutional. But it also includes Depot campus, which is a totally different scale of development. Some parts of Horse Barn Hill. Doesn't include UConn's forests. Then we've also grouped with that the churches on North Eagleville. Separately from that, we have municipal uses. So the E.O. Smith High School, we have the town hall is institutional. We've got the E.O. Smith Ball Field is institutional for some reason. The community center is institutional. The middle school is institutional, but none of the elementary schools are institutional. And then the water company is institutional, and the state highway land is institutional. And I don't know what to do with that. I don't know how to plan for that combination of areas. So yeah, if we go back to the map here, right? This is anywhere you see purple is institutional. Oh, right, the public works garage is institutional. And so what does institutional mean? Right? Once upon a time, when this map was made, this was clearly a designation for ownership. Is it owned by UConn? Is it owned by the state? Is it owned by the town? And if it is, it's institutional. But the thing is, we don't have any control over what the state does, but that doesn't mean that we're not allowed to have an opinion on what we would like the state to do. When the state goes to do something, we write a letter. We get notified in that comment period, and they tell us, what are your opinions? Please send us your comment letter, and then it goes into the record. And what we normally do when we write those comment letters is we go back to the POCD and say, what does the POCD say? Right? What did the POCD designate that we think this land makes sense for? And what was our logic behind that? And that informs our letter. So if we just say UConn is the institutional zone, then how are we supposed to have an opinion that's informed without, the reasoning behind that opinion being somewhat opaque? By having it in the plan and why we think it makes sense for these places to be what they are and what we're saying it would make sense to do, then we get to explain what we think it would make sense at a broad level scale for UConn to do with some of its land. Right? We can't tell UConn what to do. We're not pretending that we can tell UConn what to do. But it's just very non-informative right now.
So what I think,
yeah.
just some thoughts that we're thinking of is this, the Depot campus. I think we could put because there's a possibility that could transfer from UConn to another use. So, I mean, kind of thinking about what would make sense. Maybe that's mixed use center transitional, right there. So that would, offer housing, light industry, some density there, but protecting some of the neighborhood areas and obviously respecting transitions as you move into this agricultural area. And then this area along the highway that DOT owns, which is a little bit of like a no man's land, but there is a big swath of underutilized land. And if that were ever transferred to the town, to me, that's mixed use center right there. I mean, we'd want that as mixed use center. And then I think, the middle school and the public works garage probably deserves to stay rural residential agriculture forestry. I mean, I don't think we want to maintain those uses as is. Our elementary school and library are not
anything.
They're not institutional. So but kind of respecting that neighborhood. But those are some we haven't completely fleshed that up, but do people have thoughts about that?
It would really help when we look at the map to see which areas we have control on. So can we do two separate maps, one future land use for town-owned property and then future land use for Yukon and non-town owned.
I can highlight, yeah, I can make that map. What I'll do is I will pull out parcels owned
No,
by.
no, I'm just saying as, as the information, like in the maps, just have two separate, so and then have in that future land use for Yukon our suggested land uses. And in our town-owned property, we can have, if it's institutional, define what institutional is. If you want to divvy up institutional into civic uses or something else, right? So we understand what that institutional is. So
What I'm hearing is, would you like to have like a civic uses?
because you said, you're not sure what the difference between a public facility and if you think there needs to be a distinction, but all the Yukon property separated out, and we propose what that land can look like. Like it can be institutional, it can be, what did you say, the mixed use center transitional in some places. So we know that we don't have control, but at any point of time, if there is an opportunity for us to, opine on that particular use, or if it becomes town land, we know what our wish list was.
Our thoughts were to kind of simplify it, and let's just see what you all think about this. But just to, I'm wondering, we thought just let's keep the core campus alone, like what we know, and we could just call it core campus, maybe the core campus of Yukon. This whole area here. I mean, I don't think that's going to change.
Is
It's
the brown also core campus?
Sorry?
Is the dark brown also?
No, the dark, that is, no, that's compact residential.
Okay.
So this purple would be core campus, kind of let that be. And then, but we, clearly maybe within the next decade, who knows, but maybe there would be something that would be happening with the Depot campus, and maybe putting a designation there. And then also the E.O. Smith land, town hall near E.O. Smith. We are evaluating redevelopment of this campus, so perhaps adding housing, because you can have, if you're looking at zoning, you can have an institutional use in all of these, so it doesn't really, it gets confusing. But maybe putting town hall, E.O. Smith into mixed use center, and then same with this highway, the DOT land here, into mixed use center. That's sort of what we thought.
Jennifer, when you're using that term mixed use center, you're speculating, or at least the possibility, that land might be used for something other than a civic purpose?
Yeah.
Okay. By the way, Benu, I like that idea of designating things like the school, civic use, civic site, distinguishing it from the Yukon property, the core campus, and some of the other state-owned property.
We do have we have all that data. I can see how it looks on a map at the very least. Just put it together by ownership and be like, civic uses. We could outline in like gold, and then like Yukon and stuff, you could outline that in black, so it like pops against the background of the map color, and we can just see how it looks.
Yeah, if it makes it more useful, then the answer is yes.
Right.
As we look at this right now, if somebody who's been doing this for a while can follow this.
Yeah.
But I think if you're the average homeowner in one of the rural residential areas, this would take some studying.
Yeah.
It takes some studying for me too.
Mhm.
Yeah. We always have
And
to
you
sit
do
and
this for a
remind
living.
ourselves. It's kind
It's
of,
not straightforward.
Isn't there more to the Yukon property boundaries? Like there are some rural, residential, agricultural, forestry areas also that belong to Yukon.
Yeah.
and that we don't have any say on it, right?
Right,
Correct.
right.
So I'm just saying as a separate idea, have that donut hole or whatever holes we don't have any control over, and have a separate map showing what our wish list is on that donut hole.
Yeah, okay. I'm with Benu on that one.
Let's see how it looks.
Yeah, I think we should
Let's
try
see how
it.
it looks. That's a
Yeah.
good idea. Let's try it out.
All right.
Anyone got any
So-
other thoughts on anything else? We have a few other things we're working on, but we don't want to we're early enough in the sausage making on that we don't have anything functional to say. And then we're just getting into speculation in the middle of a public meeting, and that's never a good idea.
This isn't really an aside for me, but several times at the beginning of this session, we talked about the plan for the Northwest section.
Yes,
Is that available?
Yes.
It
yes,
is, okay.
we can email that to you.
I would like to see that. It was brand new.
I think that
Like,
came,
how did
we
this happen?
adopted that like the week you move, or I don't know, 2 weeks before you moved back to town, Ken. So
So I'm
I think
excused
it's-
for not knowing about it then.
you don't have it. You have plenty of excuses. Yep.
Oh,
So
thank you.
we'll send that to you.
But I would like to see it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you for
Sorry, I just had one question.
yeah.
Sorry, I'm sorry if I missed it before, but back on the residential discussion, was there like a size of the lots that we were talking as a general matter that was kind of gonna work? Was it, I think I heard like half acre maybe, or just
Yeah.
anything more there you could share. Thanks.
So we're not being prescriptive here because at the kind of broad brush level, we're talking just generally the idea is that you want more density with homes with smaller mass on smaller lots. You don't necessarily have the capacity everywhere to connect to water and sewer, which really lets you get dense. But in general, the areas that already exist that we think this makes sense for were between 0.3 and 0.9 acres. So you're looking at 15,000 to 40,000 square foot lots. I've discussed with the health department. They say, you can run into issues if you try to go much denser than half an acre lots in an area when you have no connection to water and sewer, particularly as you try to continue to build out the radii that you need to separate your septics and wells can get kind of tight. But that's the general area of what we're thinking. In order to go denser, you need to plug into existing infrastructure.
And
Thank you. That's really helpful.
yeah. So thank you. Craig, you've been quiet. Any thoughts? Not to put you on the spot, but you usually aren't shy.
No, I'm enjoying the conversation and discussion. I agree that clarity is helpful and the two maps will be interesting for us to look at.
Okay, good. All right. Well, it's a bummer that more people couldn't attend tonight, but this will be recorded. We'll encourage them to listen to this meeting or watch this meeting and provide us feedback. Again, the sausage has not been made. It won't be fully adopted for a little bit. We're hoping sooner rather than later. We do need to get this plan adopted, but we wanted to bring you into this kind of conversation early. And just if you have a question or you come up with an idea, just know that we're always here to answer questions or kind of workshop, spitball some ideas. This stuff is, we love this stuff. That's why we have these jobs. So
Oh.
But thank
Thank
you.
you, everybody.
So are we adjourned?
Yes,
Okay, the meeting is adjourned at 7:09.
thanks all. Have a good night.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Recording stopped.
Thank you.